Assalamu alaikum, Khawateen Hazrat. Waseem Ahsan welcomes you to lecture number 37 of Marketing for Nonprofits MKT728 at the Virtual University of Pakistan. This component of learning is going to be about cost marketing products. We are passing through the phase which is all about cost marketing, and we need to understand how we form cost marketing relationships and partnerships between commercial entities and nonprofits. Needless to say that this is kind of a partnership which is mutually beneficial, and therefore it has to be sorted out very carefully. There are different products which form the basis of these partnerships or relationships. So in other words, in order to give definite shape and form to these partnerships, we consider the different products which form the basis of these partnerships. One is product sales. The other one is purchase plus. The third is licensing. And the fourth one is certificates and commendations. These four product types could be divided into two different areas because the first two that I talked about, meaning product sales and purchase plus, are the ones that are driven basically by commercial entities. And the other two, which are licensing and certificates, are the ones that are driven by nonprofits. And therefore, I'm going to divide this particular component into two subcomponents. And the first one is going to be about product sales and purchase plus. We have to keep one thing in mind, that when we think of these partnerships, we need to think of a brand which is very powerful. In other words, a brand that has the promotional power to leverage itself and also the cause it is working for. Because it goes without saying that we need to give support, meaning financial support, to the nonprofit cause by way of increasing sales of the commercial brand. The more sales that we register on the commercial side, the more contribution it makes toward the cause. And therefore, it is not just a revenue generating exercise or a strategy, it also is a mission accomplishment mechanism or a strategic framework. So that is why we say it is beneficial, rather mutually beneficial for both the parties. It also needs to bear in mind that the commercial entity has got to be very knowledgeable of the advertising and promotional mix it is going to use for promoting its own brand. Because the promotion is going to mean a lot in terms of increased sales. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the commercial entity to put together a very meaningful, effective advertising and promotional campaign that is going to form the basis of this kind of a partnership. So we can see on the basis of all this that the primary objective of this kind of a partnership is to offer a certain percentage of commercial brands' sales toward nonprofit cause. This percentage could be 1%, less than 1%, or maybe a little more than 1%, depending on the mutual acceptance and approval of both the parties involved. Now, this doesn't end here. If there is a primary objective, there also has to be a secondary one. The secondary objective of this exercise is to create awareness on part of the general public that the commercial organization is working very hard for a commercial cause, thereby gaining the status of a socially responsible citizen, along with increasing its sales and creating awareness and visibility for the nonprofit cause. So there are so many different objectives that are achieved by fulfilling this overall secondary objective. The one is that overall sales increase in terms of the commercial brand sales. the revenue that goes towards the nonprofit cause also increases. And then the commercial organization is in a position to prove its corporate citizenship, along with strengthening differentiation and positioning of its own brand. And it also goes a long way toward increasing awareness by attracting new consumers toward the commercial brand and also the nonprofit cause. So we can see very clearly that the exercise is mutually beneficial. It works for all those who are involved as part of the overall relationship. It is not just the two parties, i.e., the commercial organization and the nonprofit entity. It has so many stakeholders. To look at the employees of both the organizations, in addition to the customers that we are talking about. And then see that we have dealers and all the members of the supply chain who are involved as part of the whole process. And I will throw more light on the aspect of the supply chain members. Because when I talk about mechanics involved in coming up with the right, the possible, and the optimally effective agreement between the two parties. Having said that, I can emphasize on two important factors. The one is that the relationship is mutually beneficial. Given that nature of this the partnership, the fulfillment of the objectives has got to work for both the parties at the same time. And the second important dimension of this partnership is that it is transaction based. Every sale means further contribution toward the cause. So it is not just financial contribution to the cause, it also is increased sales of the commercial brand itself. Keeping these factors in mind, it goes without saying that the two parties have got to get into kind of a partnership which is very well thought through, planned, implemented, and then monitored and controlled. How do we go about that? Well, both the parties sit together and look at the dimensions involved as the part of the overall relationship. And generally, there is a minimum limit and a maximum limit in terms of financial contribution that is spelled out by the commercial entity. And needless to say that this is a relationship which is initiated by the commercial entity. I said it at the onset of this component that this product, which is known as product sales, is initiated by the commercial entity, and commercial entity takes all the responsibility of planning and execution of the whole exercise, of course, to the acceptance and approval of the nonprofit partner as well. But it is the commercial brand or the commercial entity which really is in the driving seat because they are the ones responsible for all the execution of the program, and therefore the money which is spent on promoting the exercise or the program is incurred by the commercial entity and not by the nonprofit organization. And the reason that we have a minimum limit because the nonprofit organization has to ensure that a minimum level of financial contribution has to come its way. And at the same time, the other partner, meaning the commercial enterprise, has to ensure that it has some kind of a coverage against any financial risk. And that is why they put a cap on financial contribution. In other words, when they achieve that objective, the program almost comes towards an end. This goes without saying that the commercial entity has to take the responsibility of all the practicalities involved at the point of sale. In other words, it is the responsibility of the marketing and sales department of the commercial enterprise to come up with a comprehensive marketing plan which takes into consideration all the action plans and the activities involved therein. In other words, they have to have a very specific framework within which sales are going to be monitored because every sale that takes place anywhere within the region for which the partnership is working has to be recorded and has to be recorded in a way that there is no um, confusion between the two parties. So, in other words, they have to make sure that nothing remains obscure. The relationship goes on very transparently. And that is why I talked about the dimensions of the supply chain. Here you see the portion of the proceeds that goes towards the non-profit cause is the one which is recorded at the point of sale. So in other words, we're talking about the retail outlets where the product is eventually sold to the ultimate consumer. Now, here you see that there can be a problem because there are certain stores where things are scanned electronically, and they make very good use of the universal product barcode. But then we also have retail outlets in the context of our society and our country where we do not really have these facilities. And therefore, that might cause a certain level of confusion between the two parties. So these are the kind of details that the parties could have to look into. And for that, the marketing and sales department is basically responsible. Wherever they think there can be confusion, maybe they can deviate from the original understanding and gonna make the certain yardsticks in terms of saying that the sales recorded will have the following basis. So for example, anything that goes out of the distributors go down, or anything you see that enters the retail outlets, regardless of the fact whether it is sold or not, the contribution is going to be made. I'm just talking hypothetically. All I'm trying to draw your attention toward is the fact that all the details of supply chain dimensions and wherever there is a possibility of confusion coming up, meaning all those critical points which may cause either confusion or may help toward creating or rather generating certain clarifications are important to consider. And they have to be taken into consideration while we come up with detailed agreement. And also, needless to say that such agreements are part of the contract management or agreement with the management, which has to be vetted by somebody specializing in the field of law. It is not something which should be left just to the marketing and sales people, because that is going to be an extra burden on the responsibilities of those people. And they have to be supported by bringing in input from specialists in the field of law. And that is how we come up with these kinds of agreements. There are a few other things that we need to take into consideration in addition to monitoring sales, and those are how the financial contribution is going to be transmitted to the nonprofit organization, and what is going to be the time frame. Is it going to take place on daily basis, or is it going to take place on a different time frame basis? Whatever is suitable to both the parties is agreed to. Having said all this, I would now like to draw your attention to the fact that there are certain considerations or a few challenges that people from both the parties could have to look into. And they are so important that they really have a direct bearing on the mechanics that I talked about as part of the overall agreement. In the very first place, they've got to ensure that nothing remains obscure to either of the parties. In other words, the agreement has got to be very, very transparent. All the terms and conditions have got to be explained in very simple and plain terms and terminologies so that there could be no two interpretations to one particular condition. And we also have to take another important factor into consideration, and that is the factor of consumers becoming very conscious and discriminatory of the fact that organizations that help and support a nonprofit cause are the ones that are preferred by them. This is the case with Western markets. And I have to say here that although this particular phenomenon is very new to this market, but the time is not very far when we shall have these the kind of situations prevailing here as well. It only is a matter of an organization, or rather two organizations, the one on the commercial side, other on the nonprofit side, to kick off this kind of an agreement, and that will set the ball rolling for generation of this consciousness. And people will become very discriminating in terms of deciding what brand they should be supporting. We know that we have research findings in terms of the majority of the consumers in the Western markets, in the US in particular, for which we have the statistical evidence that more than 80% of consumers, or rather close to 90% of consumers, prefer that particular commercial consumable brand, which is equal in quality with any other brand, which also is price competitive, but they support this brand only because this particular brand supports a nonprofit cause. So therefore, the commercial organizations have got to be very careful with this particular reckoning on part of the consumers, because they have to have a very strong brand in the first place. And in the second place, they've got to make sure that their brand stays strong and becomes stronger in the due process, because one of the objectives is to create awareness for the nonprofit cause as well as for what they are doing for the nonprofit cause. So, in other words, they also have to create visibility for themselves in order to be seen as socially responsible citizens. This is a very, very important consideration, and rather, it is a huge challenge which is to be met by the commercial organization in particular. And what is important for the nonprofit organization to make sure that the commercial organization is conscious of this particular fact. In addition to that, another consideration that the nonprofit organization has to keep in mind is that of a minimum fee. They have to have a minimum fee which must come their way in case the exercise does not prove to be highly successful. There is one more consideration they have to take it very seriously, and it is for both the parties, and that is evaluating the exercise during the time it is being executed, and also after it is completed, because the result is going to be beneficial for them for the next period they are going to undertake this exercise. And the partners who ignore this the particular fact can get into problems at a later stage. Another challenge which has to be addressed by the nonprofit organizations is lending of their name, their logo, and all the features of the identity level, if you remember all that, because all those things could become part of the product packaging when the campaign is launched. And this, of course, is another factor which is not just a challenge, but it also becomes kind of a condition for the agreement to be completed, because without talking about the assets of the nonprofit organization, there is no way that we can complete the exercise. And in what shape and form these features are going to be used by the commercial brand is something for which the nonprofit organization has to play a very important role. They've got to make sure that nothing is distorted and things appear on the product packaging the way nonprofit organization wants them to appear. And here you see the input from both the parties. As a matter of fact, that becomes important, because the commercial brand has to ensure that the nonprofit logo, name, and any message they may like to communicate on the package is given the prominent space on the product package, because they would like to make that very visible, along with the other advertising and promotion supports which they put together to make the program an overall success. So it is not just the advertising and promotional supports or the marketing collaterals at the point of sale. It is overall the promotions, and it also is the product package which contains the assets of the nonprofit organization. So these are some of the important challenges or considerations that are to be taken into a very serious account while the two parties try to uh, come up with the final shape and form of the agreement. And once the agreement is in place, of course, it is upon the two parties to kick it off. And like I said, it is subject to a certain time frame, which is mutually decided and is part of the agreement. And it is not a one-off thing. It is something repetitive, and it happens year over year over year. Having said all this, I should summarize all the benefits that two parties derive out of this partnership. And I would like to, like I said, in very few words, say that this basically is an exercise which creates a value exchange. And that takes us back to the concept of value exchange, which I talked about in one of the earlier components. Both parties create value for each other. The commercial brand creates value for the nonprofit organization, firstly in terms of financial terms, and then also in terms of mission accomplishment. And it involves, the staff members and all the stakeholders from the nonprofit side. On the commercial side, it becomes very supportive in terms of an increase in sales of the brand because it increases the usage. When people become aware of the fact that the commercial brand is supporting a nonprofit cause, they buy more and more of that product. Now, that increase in sales comes from the existing customers and also from new customers. And that is the segment of their market which has the potential to become loyal to that particular brand. And if you come to think of it, it is a huge benefit for the commercial organization. And then, in qualitative terms, the commercial organizations going to have a point to prove. They are very responsible citizens. They do care about the society, while they also take care of the position of their brand and do all those things which any good commercial organization should do to its brands. Now, having said that, I would now like to talk about a practical example which will make all these concepts very clear. I'm going to give you quite a few examples in relation to different concepts that I talk about cause marketing. And the examples which I'm going to quote are, it just so happens from the US market because of the fact that the cost marketing concept or the phenomenon is very popular there. And it has been popular for the last couple of decades. The fact that we do not really have, a very solid example with statistical evidence of the success of this kind of a program in our society. I'm constrained to give an example from here, but my intention here is only to make the concept very, very clear. I'm going to talk about a partnership that took place a few years ago between a nonprofit organization in the US that was concerned and still is concerned about developing playgrounds for the children of America. The mission was to come up with the playgrounds for children of almost every neighborhood, because the objective was to have a playground where a child can walk. Now, when you really think of the seriousness of this particular objective, I think it makes it very obvious that they wanted to have a playground in every neighborhood of the US. That neighborhood just which lacked a playground. Um, so this also shows how concerned they were about improving conditions in the society in terms of improving lives of their children. The other partner that they got into the partnership was an ice cream manufacturer. And I think they may still have this program going on every year, and the ice cream manufacturer still exists in that market. This ice cream company believes in the concept of linked prosperity because they're convinced if the assets from both the companies are put together, then they have an opportunity of bringing about prosperity in the field they have chosen to work on. And needless to say, the nonprofit organization got into the particular program because they made such programs and partnerships the mainstay of their funding strategy. Would you believe that this organization generates more than 90% of their revenues through such partnerships? So, in other words, this organization is all about cost marketing partnerships. And they got into the partnership not with just this ice cream the manufacturing company. They got into the partnerships with many other companies for different causes because they keep working for not just one cause, rather for different causes. This particular cause they worked on is from the area of playgrounds. And the example is going to center on all the mechanics they worked out for developing these playgrounds in collaboration and partnership with the ice cream company. Now, how this partnership took off and what the main features of the mechanics they put together in order to come up with a very effective agreement is going to be the topic of this the particular explanation. Well, in the first place, they had an option to choose the brand or which offering from the overall product line they should tie with the nonprofit cause. Because here, I would like to add one thing that as the part of the agreement, you've got to identify the one particular brand which is going to be the brand supporting the cause. And the reason I'm talking about here is because this ice cream company has a lot of brands, and they had to be clear about which one is going to support the cause. And whenever you are dealing with a multi-brand company like this ice cream company, you've got to choose the one brand which is going to tie itself with your cause. And this company, while choosing the brand had the option of either choosing something which existed or introducing something which did not exist, and they rather opted for that. They introduced a new brand. They were so confident that their brand would be acceptable and they would do roaring business with the children of America that they put together a complete marketing initiative to come up with that particular ice cream brand. The smart move on part of the ice cream company was that the name of that particular offering represented both the organizations. Now, how do you do that? Well, it was a contraction of the two names, and the contraction of the names was such, while pronouncing, it made it very obvious and very clear that the brand represents the two organizations. So this is the smart move which the ice cream company put together to make their brand well known for the cause. They wanted to work on this cause with a big bang, and therefore they thought that it will carry a lot of clarity with a brand which is going to be meant only for the kids of America. And then you see they put together a very comprehensive advertising and promotional campaign which had a very attractive appeal for those kids. The ice cream was meant for, or the playgrounds were meant for. And the mechanics worked like the following: that every ice cream that was sold, a certain the percentage of that would go toward the nonprofit cause, which was development of the playgrounds. Another important feature of this agreement was that it created kind of a trio of the partners in cause. It was not just the ice cream company and the nonprofit organization, it also was the dealers and retailers who were selling ice cream. Because without their support, this objective of selling the new brand could not have been achieved in the first place, because the ice cream company wanted to have prime shelf space at the different important and the prime retailers who sold ice cream or sell ice cream in the US market. And therefore, it was very important to take those stakeholders on board. And it just so worked that the stakeholders worked with a lot of enthusiasm, and they became part of the exercise. And the fact is that it is a recorded history that playgrounds, with the help of retailers and dealers and staff members from both the companies, developed playgrounds in just one day. Now, this sounds very unrealistic, but the fact is that this is the marketing literature which testifies this particular move. And this is how they sold more and more ice cream. They involved and engaged more and more consumers, the kids, their parents, because they knew that while their kids buy this particular brand of ice cream, they contribute toward the particular cause of developing playgrounds in the US. And it, there was an exercise which required huge funding. And the nonprofit organization could not have been in a position to do that all by itself. They had to have partners, and they just look at the strength, I mean the marketing strength and prowess of this particular company that was in a position to sell so much ice cream in their market that they were in a position to develop contribution, although it was just a tiny portion of the sales proceeds that they succeeded in developing playgrounds. The exercise takes place every year. Um, it probably goes on for 1 month, if I remember correctly. And it strengthens the commercial brand. It involves so many stakeholders. It differentiates the commercial brand, and it gives the commercial organization a leadership role whereby the organization can claim to be differentiated from its competitors, because this is not something which can be copied by competitors, because a nonprofit would not get into a similar agreement with another organization unless it is a campaign altogether different. And it also helped the nonprofit organization achieve its mission, and so on and so forth. So, in other words, we can say that the commercial organization had goals which were not just economic, but they were also social. And when it comes to the nonprofit organization, we have to appreciate the smartness of the organization to have capitalized on the opportunity of joining hands with the ice cream company that has been so much supportive of the cause. So it depends a lot on the nonprofit organization to make the right decision at the right time, to get into the right kind of partnership in order to have support for their cause, to have support in a way that they generate enough revenue, and they also achieve their mission. When we say they should be able to achieve their mission, it means um, they are completely successful in achieving all their goals. And the money they have generated with the help of the commercial brand was supportive in terms of all the operational expenses. The money that is generated through this kind of a partnership does not necessarily go toward that particular program. This will and can stay in the kitty of the organization, and can be utilized for the overall operational support. And this is how this the program became extremely successful. And with this explanation, I hope very much, and rather am confident, that we fully understand how this particular product, which is known as product sales, that can give a definite shape and form to a cause partnership, which is meant to create a value exchange for both the partners. And we know what a value exchange is, and we also know the kind of the value it creates for both the parties. And we also know the difference between the value which is generated and the values which are harbored by both the parties, that bring them together, and owing to a subscription to which both the parties come forward and join hands to do um, this kind of a partnership. With this, let me now talk about the other product, which is known as the Purchase Plus. Purchase Plus is a little different from product sales. As we have noticed, product sales is something which takes care of the contribution factor as part of the built-in mechanism. In other words, a certain portion of the overall sales proceeds that goes towards the nonprofit cause. Here, as part of the Purchase Plus, anything that comes toward the way of the nonprofit cause is in addition to the price that is charged for the product. So, in other words, if you pay rupees 100 for the product, anything that you pay in addition to that, the 100, is what you call Purchase Plus. You may donate the 1 rupee, you may donate 2 or 5. It all depends on your wish and your intention. So, in other words, the contribution is mostly dependent on the wishes and intentions of the consumers who pay or who may choose not to pay at all. It all depends on the effectiveness of the promotional hype that the commercial brand is in a position to create. If they are in a position to carry out effective advertising, because it is their responsibility. And let me add here that this also is a product, meaning Purchase Plus also is a product which is initiated basically by the commercial brand. So if the commercial brand is in a position to create the kind of hype which supports itself and also a lot of awareness on part of the consumers about the nonprofit cause, they are in a position to actuate consumers to make their contribution toward this particular cause. The contribution basically is made in a box, which is placed right next to the cash register. So this is what you may call the charity in the box kind of a traditional concept. But here again, it has a little difference. The charity in the box concept, which has been in practice for as long as you and I can go backwards in our lives, is something which is not initiated by the brand. It is something which is initiated by the NPO, I mean the nonprofit organization. They place a box somewhere close to the cash register, and then it all depends on the consumers walking through that cash register whether they're going to make their contribution or not. There is hardly any advertising for the cause because it is something initiated by the nonprofit organization that mostly is not in a position to undertake kind of a promotional hype created by its counterparts, meaning commercial brands. So this is where this concept of contribution, meaning the Purchase Plus, differs from charity in the box, because here the box belongs to the brand and the box is placed by the brand, and the brand is the one that works on that particular box, and brand is responsible for generating those contributions. And this is what I've been talking about, meaning advertising and promotion being the prime responsibility of the commercial brand. The brand, therefore, has got to be a very strong brand which not only can support itself, but also can create a lot of contributions for the nonprofit cause. And the brand will generate those contributions only if a very effective advertising and promotional hype has been created around it. And you cannot create the very effective hype unless your brand is already very strong. I'm not making a statement here, but the fact remains that a strong brand with a strong advertising and promotional campaign can be an extremely effective instrument for creating or generating the kind of contributions which are based on wishes and intentions. So this is the crux of the whole matter. And here, it's not only the strength of the brand, it also is the strength of the commercial brand's relationship with the supermarkets, not just the one supermarket, but rather with all the supermarkets and stores within the region that is subject to this particular partnership or exercise. Just look at the number of products the supermarkets sell, and look at just one brand which is going to generate the contributions for this the particular cause. And the brand, therefore, meaning the commercial brand, has to be very strong to be able to motivate people into making the desired contributions. Funding with the help of this kind of a program, therefore, can be unrestricted. This, again, happens to be a difference between Purchase Plus and product sales. Because of the feature, one is the built-in, and the other one is not built into the pricing. The other one is kind of an added feature which generates contributions, and therefore there is no cap on the level of contributions that are made by consumers and go towards the nonprofit cause. One important factor that the two partners have to take into consideration, it also is very challenging, is how to distribute the donations that have been collected at the so many different points of sale. There could be a lot of confusion about the contributions made by consumers walking through the cash registers and those charity boxes Therefore, the two parties going to have to be very clear about where exactly to place the box and the mechanisms that are going to monitor the collection and then distribution of those donations to the nonprofit. This, I would say again, is a much the bigger challenge than monitoring sales, which can be monitored with the help of those latest modern the barcoding systems. And therefore, it calls for a tremendous need to be very clear on the terms and conditions. Let me now give you a beautiful example of this kind of a relationship between the two cause partners, the one being a medical association and an association, again in the US, they're working on the cause of cancer, and the other being the pharmacy. And this pharmacy happens to be a big brand name in itself. And therefore, the relationship that existed or that may still exist is between this association and this particular brand, which happens to be a huge chain of the pharmacies, or in other words, drugstores. This drugstore happens to have the objective of being the best in terms of offering service within drugstores that are part of the chain. And with that intention, they joined hands with the Medical Association back in 1996. The campaign they worked out is carried out every year during the month of May. It lasts for 1 month every year. And the mechanics of the agreement they work like the following: where any transaction that takes place within this the particular chain of pharmacies, the staff would solicit the $1 on every sale. The meaning the consumer would contribute to the $1 in addition to the purchase that has taken place there. Now, this is not to say that the consumer is obliged to pay that. The consumer may choose not to pay that particular contribution. But that's not the point here. The point is that during 1 year, back in 2004, 2.2 million customers walked into such drugstores, and they generated something like $2.2 million toward the cause. So you can well imagine the amount of money that was generated during just 1 year. And with every year passing by, the cause gets more and more strengthened. The association or the society, I may keep interchanging these two terminologies because I'm not revealing the actual name as part of my lecture. But the fact remains that without the help of the particular retailer or this particular brand name, the association could not have been in a position to generate the kind of revenue which I have indicated. $2.2 million could buy 2.2 million customers walking into those stores. It's not just the financial contribution that the nonprofit received toward its the financial revenue stream. It also is the value of the earned media. If you recall, let's go back to the experiential the level and the other related components in which I talked about the media that the nonprofit organizations could have an opportunity to earn the meaning for which they don't pay. That somebody else pays, and it works eventually to the total benefit of the nonprofit organization and its cause. I would like to make one clarification here. I talked about the unrestricted flow of contributions in terms of the Purchase Plus product. But when I talked about this particular example, it really restricts the contributors to make a restricted contribution of just $1. This is kind of a deviation from the concept, but it still remains as the way I talked about, meaning contributions can be unrestricted. This is a very specific example of the Purchase Plus phenomenon because $1 was donated in addition to the purchase that took place at the pharmacy. Thanks.